Then we're going to go and get started with our first webinar of 2026. Appreciate you all taking the time to be here with us in the Reliance family this afternoon. Just a few brief housekeeping items before we dive in. If you haven't had the opportunity to meet me yet, my name is Zach Holcomb. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Reliance Financial Partners. I joined the Reliance family about a year ago on the business development team, helping run point on our live experiences, events, and now our online webinars. If you attended some of these last year, you probably had the opportunity to see myself and Grace. Today, we are going to have a short session on keys to retirement planning success in 2026 and just some things you should be thinking about this year. We anticipate this session is going to last around 40 minutes or so you're going to be able to get back to your day relatively quickly. It's going to be a lot of information in a short amount of time. Don't worry about scrambling to take a bunch of notes or writing any of this down. We're going to be sending out the replay before the end of the week. So if there's anything shared that you want to reference back upon, you're going to have the ability to do that. One thing I do always need to make clear during today's presentation is today is about information only and not specific advice. For us here as fiduciaries at Reliance Financial Partners, for us to give you specific advice, we need to have a full understanding of your specific situation. One additional reminder before we dive in, we are launching our speaker series only for our Reliance Financial Partners clients starting tomorrow. There are some of you on this broadcast today that are not clients of Reliance Financial Partners, so this only applies to current clients of Reliance. We have our first guest speaker tomorrow at this time, 1 o'clock, Amy Rambo. She's a travel advisor with Blue Pineapple Travel. We're going to have a short session on how to create a realistic travel budget for retirement. She's an amazing speaker. She's got some great information to share with all of you. If you have not signed up for that yet, the invitation was sent to your email one last time this morning. Again, same thing applies. If you can't make it to that session, no worries. Just go ahead and sign up. We'll get the replay to your inbox later this week when it's ready to go out. Um, Getting ready to jump in though here today. At the end of the presentation, if you're not a current client of Reliance Financial Partners and you have questions about the material, how it may impact your current planning, we would love to have a brief conversation with you. We'll let you know what you need to do to get in contact with us. But if you're a current client, you have some questions about the material presented today, as always, never hesitate to reach out, drop your questions in the chat. We're more than happy to follow up with you later. To get those questions answered. But before I pass the baton over to today's presenter, Grace Suchy, she's a wealth advisor here at Reliance. I want to share a little background information about her career if you're not familiar with her. Grace has over 30 years experience spanning a wide variety of financial service companies and elder law. She's got a deep, well-rounded perspective from her time at TD Bank, JP Morgan Chase, Hurley Elder Care Law, and now Reliance Financial Partners, where she helps many of our client family navigate uncertainty in retirement with clarity and confidence. And she is thrilled to once again be presenting with you today on keys to retirement planning success in 2026. And I think Grace is giving me the thumbs up that she's ready to take over and rock and roll.
All right. Thanks, Zach. It's so great to be back doing this again. I love teaching these classes and educating, and very excited to be here. So, hello, everybody. Gonna jump right in here. So, just for anybody who's not familiar with us and our team, this is the Reliance Financial Partners family. You can see our founders, Dana and Tyler Dunkelberger, as well as the rest of our team who really come in every day, just super excited to serve and help our clients. So, just in case you're not familiar, here's a nice little view of everyone. And our staff is just constantly growing, which has been really amazing over the past couple years here. Now, what we're going to be talking about today are the key areas in retirement planning. And so that kind of follows the financial planning model. So, in order to have a robust, full financial plan, you want to make sure that all areas are covered in terms of income, investment, legacy and estate, taxes, and healthcare. Sometimes you may, talk with an advisor who maybe is just focusing on one or two of these areas. And to be robust and comprehensive, we firmly believe with your plan on purpose that we are addressing all of these areas. So I'm going to go through each area individually, starting with income. Income is really the foundation of a retirement plan. That's why I mentioned it first, kind of at the bottom of the wheel there, kind of keeping everything together. Developing an income plan is really the most important place to start. And when we're developing your income plan here, yes, of course, we want to talk to you about, your expenses and, how much money you'll be spending in retirement. But we're also exploring your life goals and what you want to do in retirement. This is something that's incredibly important to make sure that we're funding. So we may ask you things such as, what do you want to do in terms of travel? What about, gifts to family? What about, charity, things of that nature? What is really your true desire? You may want to, I know when I retire, I'm going to want to build out my casita and have a music studio. So that's going to need to be in my financial plan for sure. Um, Focusing on, we want to also make sure that we are flexible and that, we are looking at certainty. So one of the main things we focus on when we're building out your plan is really just in the very basics, just making sure that you're not going to run out of money. And we can go through and threat cast that in many different ways. We can say, hey, what happens if there's a long-term care event here? What happens if one spouse predeceases the other? How does that impact the plan? So threat casting for certainty is very important. And also, we're looking at longevity. So we project out to age 95. I hope, some of you may live beyond that. But that's a great place to start to make sure that you're going to have money you need for the rest of your life. So what we're also looking at is making sure that we're navigating market volatility because that can create uncertainty in your plan. Also, the fact that people are living longer than ever, and that traditional pensions are disappearing. So many people are having to self-fund this with their own money. So how do you do that? Sequence of returns is also a huge risk to retirement. And just to kind of put that in like kind of simple terms, as you're entering retirement, if there's a big market downturn, then that's going to kind of put you in a scenario when you begin drawing on your portfolio where it's going to be much harder to recover. So we want to make sure that we're addressing that as well. And so at the end of the day, it all comes down to cash flow. If you've sat in a meeting with me, many times I'll pull up your 5-year cash flow. That's one of my favorite things to look at with clients. I'll go out 5 or 10 years and kind of show you what it's going to look like. And we can go in there and tweak and, I can add a purchase of a vehicle or, a second home or whatever and just see how that's going to end up for you. It's really cool and exciting to see. So where are people getting, income in retirement? So basically, the major sources of retirement are going to be Social Security currently. One of the most popular questions I get is, well, when should I take this? And to me, timing is key, but everybody's different. So I like to take a very personal and also emotional approach to the answer to that question because longevity also impacts, when you should take Social Security, and none of us could predict that. So I think being very aware of your options is important. Of course, if you have a pension, we want to utilize that as well. And, we're going to look at your investment portfolio as well. Many people have heard of what's called the 4% rule, where, looking at withdrawing 4% of your portfolio throughout your life. That's not like a hard and fast rule, but it's an interesting thing to illustrate to show you what that would look like. We also look at guaranteed income solutions. So where there may not be guarantees for income, we can create those and show you what that looks like to make sure that you have the confidence, especially if you don't have a pension, to know that no matter what happens with your money or the market, that you won't run out of money and that your income needs will be met. And then some people have other assets that they're taking into retirement, such as rental income, business income, things like that. And that brings important questions such as, well, how long do you want to manage these properties? How long do you want to run this business? What's your plan there? And these are all things that we have to understand as we're, going into retirement and taking you through that. And your answers may change. You may decide, hey, I want to manage my properties forever and I want to give them to my children. But then 10 years into retirement, you could say, I'm sick of chasing these rents. I don't want to do this maintenance anymore. What solutions, what options do I have? How do I unroll this in the most tax efficient manner possible? And these are all things that we can address. So again, managing key retirement risks in retirement, um, or income risks in retirement, sorry, would be market risk, longevity risk, inflation. and the cost of things going up. You plan for one thing and everything's more expensive. That's something that I hear from a lot of clients right now, especially with things like insurance right now is very, very expensive. Behavioral risk. Like what do you want to do in spending? And sometimes we have to have those tough conversations with people where we say, like, hey, your expenses are high. We need to figure out a way to either address spending or be able to create more income. And then tax risk. So, we don't know what's going to happen with the tax code and if taxes are going to go up. We assume that they will at some point, but that's all important stuff for us that are unknowns that can impact our plan that we need to be ready to deal with. So then if we go to understanding our investment principles, so volatility is a part of investing. So this is kind of showing you, over the past 75 years, like the number of major market, pullbacks essentially. So in the past 75 years, we've seen 72 pullbacks of more than 5% or more, 26 pullbacks of 10% or more, 11 pullbacks of 20% or more, and several of 30 to 50% during major crises. So it's just part of investment. It can happen at any time. And it's something that you just have to be prepared for when you are investing and making sure that your portfolio is aligned with your risk comfort. However, the market is the best place to be historically because, the gains are steady and increasing. So uh, you know, having money in the market will typically outperform most other vehicles. Of course, we're looking at long-term performance. So if we're looking at very short-term performance, then we may not be able to say that. But so that's why time horizon is huge when you're picking your investments. So one thing that is talked about is about the market being at all-time highs and people being afraid of that. And that's a good point, and that's something that, we look at as well, like are things overvalued and things like that. But if you kind of look at history, the market has consistently increased over time, and you kind of have to look at it like going up a step of stairs, right? So if you're going up some stairs and you're at your all-time high, which is maybe stair number three, but there's four, five, six ahead of you, it doesn't mean you always have to take a stair down, but you have to be aware of, the again with the volatility again. So yes, we know the market, they're saying is at overvalued, all-time highs, things like that. But there's nothing that says that things can't continue to increase because they have increased over time. What you don't want to do is you don't want to panic at slight pullbacks. So this chart here is showing you two things. You've got the bottom row here, which essentially is showing an example of somebody pulling or selling every time the market pulls back 5%. And then the top, the increasing line here is, oh my God, my light shut off. Oh, okay. And then this increasing line is showing the growth with staying invested through the pullbacks. So the important thing to do is when you do see a pullback, and we have seen some, we saw some last year, a couple times last year, is to stay invested. And, we're here to talk to you and kind of talk you through navigating the emotions of that for sure. When you sell prematurely, you could be locking in your losses and it could make that harder to recover from. So now we're getting into two of my favorite subjects, which are taxes and legacy planning. So I love talking about taxes. If you're in my office, we'll talk about taxes a lot. Um, so strategic tax planning should occur in every corner of your retirement plan. Um, if we're expecting your assets to last for the rest of your life and then perhaps even be passed on, we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of any and all tax breaks that are available to us. So staying up on the current tax laws is key. And it's something that, as advisors, that we need to be diligent about. Sometimes what you'll see though is, there's shallow versus deep planning. So, shallow planning would be kind of the basics of what you are expecting your financial advisor or your financial planner to do, which is talk with you about Social Security, investments, and RMDs and making sure that you're taking those. But there's so much more. Digging into tax planning, Roth planning, making sure capital gains and harvesting those in a tax efficient manner is essential. We also want to make sure we're mitigating your risk. If we can achieve similar returns with less risk, let's do that. No reason to swing for the fence if we don't need to. Uh, Talking about leaving money behind for your beneficiaries, if that's important to you, but also spending money while you're alive and enjoying your retirement. But also estate. Do you have your power of attorney? What about long-term care? All of those good things we want to make sure that we're covering and planning. And these are things that I really enjoy digging into. So if you look at the history of tax rates, taxes were higher before, sky high. Now they're lower and we have those tax brackets locked in, but the opportunity is now to plan for the future if taxes go up. So you may have seen this before in one of our seminars if you've ever attended any of our prior speaking engagements, but sometimes we will talk about what we call the tax triangle, which we have illustrated here for you. So the tax triangle is kind of like a three-point situation here where you're figuring out like when taxes are going to be paid. So for certain investments, you're going to pay taxes now. That would be your CDs. That would be your, non-IRA withdrawals. That would be if you're in a taxable account. That would be your 401k or IRA plans as well, if you take withdrawals from there. You also have tax deferred vehicles such as annuities, where you may be paying taxes later. And then never again. So maybe you're paid taxes and now you're never again going to pay taxes with something like a Roth IRA, life insurance, things of that nature. So we like to move as much money as we can from the now to the never again if we can. So last year, a tax bill passed, the One Big Beautiful Bill. And I did do a separate webinar on that, which I would encourage everyone, if you're interested, to watch because I covered the specific changes in that came into play last year. But some of those here that I'm highlighting here is that there was a permanent extending of the current tax brackets. And so I have those listed out here for you. Of course, that is subject to future legislation. Nothing is anything really truly permanent. I mean, we'll have to see. The standard deduction remains elevated. So this is showing you the 2026 numbers for single and married filing joint filers. Um, these oh, and also, sorry, one of my favorite things to talk about is the senior deduction that is in place from 25 to 28. It's an additional $6,000. Now, of course, subject to income limits per individual that you can take advantage of. And that gives us tremendous opportunity for doing things that in a more tax efficient manner, such as Roth conversions, and certainly spent a lot of time doing those last year. So this is just showing you the tax brackets for 2026, which I certainly am not going to read, but just understand that that's available and they have changed. One thing I talk about a lot in meetings, especially when we're talking about advantages of Roth conversions and things of that nature, is the surviving spouse tax trap. So if I kind of go back to my previous slide here, maybe. Okay, there we go. Um, the tax brackets are much different for married couples filing jointly and single filers. When one spouse passes away, the other spouse will then become a single filer and then will be subject to higher tax rates. So that is something that makes it advantageous to do tax planning in a married couple, especially now while everyone is still alive. Um, just to give an example here, like for a married couple at $95,000 in income, you're in the 12% bracket. If you're a single filer, you could be in the 22% bracket at 70,000. So it could be a big difference. So important to get in front of that and while you can, essentially. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the Secure Act and some of the changes there. One of the biggest changes with the Secure Act was that they eliminated the stretch provision for non-spouse beneficiaries of IRAs. So previous to January of 2020, if you inherited an IRA from a non-spouse, you had a stretch option, which would allow life expectancy withdrawals. So if you have IRAs from before then you're still good. But after that, non-spouse beneficiaries are now required to liquidate the entire IRA balance within 10 years of the original IRA owner's death. That can create some very taxable scenarios, and again, goes to the importance of tax planning for you, for your beneficiaries. Another change was the required minimum distribution age, which is currently 73, was pushed to 75 if you were born after 1959. Oh my gosh. So some people coming up into retirement will have RMDs starting at 75, some will have it 73. Figure out, we can help you figure out when that's going to be for you. So that's good. You get to delay it a little bit longer, but that also means your retirement account theoretically could be bigger, which means your RMDs could be larger, which means you could have more income, basically. Um, so just something to be aware of. Again, it all comes down to planning for these things. It also gives you a little more time to do Roth conversions before RMD age. So definitely something to look at. As far as legacy planning goes, Zach mentioned I worked for an elder law firm for 10 years. And so I've seen a lot of legacy in my days. Always good idea to make sure you have your beneficiary designations in place. And I always recommend having the paperwork to support this. I have actually seen scenarios where beneficiaries were changed and through a bank merger, that information was lost. And it was the burden of the client to produce the paperwork showing that the beneficiary was the way it was. I've actually run into that more than once. I'm not going to say it's been a ton, but I always recommend that you get a printout from your bank showing who the beneficiaries are or a copy of your signed beneficiary form and just have that in your file with your important paperwork. Speaking of important paperwork, you want to make sure that your essential legal documents have been completed. That would be your powers of attorney for finances and healthcare and your will. Whether or not you need a trust that is dependent on, the advice of your attorney. Not everyone needs to go through all that, but it's good to know if that would be something that's helpful for you. So if you've not had that reviewed or if you have older documents, it's a very good idea just to have those reviewed to make sure that they're still going to do what you want them to do as well. So if you have documents from 20 years ago, you may have, I've seen clients that have had siblings that may have passed as their agents and now they want their children. So you want to just dust those off, take a look at them, make sure that they are the way they are, even if you did get them put in place years ago. And just make sure you create a plan and communicate your wishes to your family. I mean, it's not always easy to talk about those things, but it is important to make sure that, your family, especially if you have a power of attorney agent, knows what your wishes are, knows what to expect. One thing that I talk to clients about is something I call a go book, which I have a whole list of things that with ideas of what you could put into this go book. The idea being, if something happens to you unexpectedly, knock on wood, your agent or whoever's stepping in for you could pick up this book and go. And it can have things such as like, your essential legal documents, maybe copies of insurance cards or driver's license. If you're in the hospital, they're going to need that. Your wishes for, what happens when you pass away and things of that nature. Having everything in one place ready to go, I think is a great idea. And I like to talk to people about that. So happy to discuss. Going back to Roth conversions, again, this is huge for us. Towards the end of last year, we like to kind of work on this in the fourth quarter, and once we're more aware of what your income is going to be. Um, Essentially, what we're trying to do is take advantage of these tax rates to help you save money on taxes later. So, um, it's definitely something that should be looked at and considered in every scenario. Is it always the right answer? Not always, and it might be a not right now. Like if you're still working with very high income, that might not be the time to do it. But let's think about like retirement and how we're going to do that and how we're going to structure that. Planning is planning, meaning like you're not just looking at today, you're looking at what you're going to do in the future. What does 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now look like? And let's make sure that we're ready. We can be ready to shift if we need to, but let's at least have a plan. So one strategy that people use when they're doing Roth conversions is what's called like a fill up your bucket approach. So the before here is showing, a person that maybe is halfway into that 22% bracket. Perhaps they convert up to the 22% bracket, not exceeding into the next bracket and kind of fill up that difference with what they want to convert to Roth. Of course, we want to be very mindful when we're doing things is in terms of like, are we going to, we need to look at the IRMA brackets and make sure that, we're not going over, limits that are going to make you have to pay more for Medicare or for some people, they're okay with doing that. We just have to make sure that we're communicating and looking at the pros and cons of every decision that we make. But this is kind of like the why, and this is very much like the type of screen that I would put up on the TV if you're in your office in the office with me, kind of showing you like the before and after. So in this particular case for Brett and Logan, uh, this is showing kind of what the income tax base would be with no tax planning whatsoever. So this is, if you see, there's a lot of blue and a lot of high lines going up as they continue to get older. So with a little bit of Roth converting, that yellow part that you see there is showing, money going into Roth and you're paying taxes now. This is showing the impact for later. So see, you're paying essentially taxes now just to be in a much lower tax bracket later. And if you look at that, cumulative tax number and assets left, you can really see the impact. So I'm going to go back to the before. Cumulative taxes were about 2.5 million, portfolio assets 4.9, portfolio and cumulative taxes later about half and double. So again, now this is the thing. I run these scenarios for people in financial planning. So I like to see how it looks and the impact of these conversions. And I like to show people like what that looks like for them. Oh my gosh, this light. You guys, we're gonna have to talk to Dana about this. All right, so healthcare and retirement. Okay, so healthcare and retirement is something that's near and dear to my heart. As I mentioned, I worked for an elder law firm. One of the things I did was asset protection and Medicaid planning for nursing home care. So I've seen a lot of very big and scary bills and facilities for people that need care or people that need care in the home and what that costs like and what that cost looks like and things of that nature. Healthcare as you age is one of the largest and most unpredictable retirement expenses. We don't know if we're going to have it or not, and it can have a severe impact on your plan. In fact, that's something that we very often threat cast. And the costs increase with age, they don't decrease. So, it's only going to get more expensive. And Medicare can help and your insurance can help, but it doesn't cover everything. One of the kind of misconceptions that I've seen people have is thinking that if they do have a, long-term care scenario where they're going to be in skilled nursing, that they're surprised to find out that it will be out of pocket after 100 days, essentially. So you want to make sure you have a plan for that. And out-of-pocket expenses can really, really disrupt your income if there's not a plan in place. So that is something that I like to look at in a very realistic manner. So as we're preparing for unexpected healthcare costs, first, I think it's very important to develop a care plan for the unexpected and put a proactive plan in place to address. So this is just going away from money. This is going to what do you want? In terms of like, what do you want? What don't you want? If something were to happen to you or your spouse, is it your plan to take care of that person in the home? What will you be bringing in? Thinking of those types of things is, very important and kind of figuring out what the cost is as to what your wishes are. And like, let's do that first and back into it. Um, we want to make sure that we're coordinating income sources to draw funds in the most tax efficient manner possible. So some medical expenses, they may be tax deductible. So we want to make sure that if that is the case, that, we're using accounts in a way that it's going to be very helpful from a tax perspective. We also want to make sure we're adjusting that plan over time as costs, needs, and coverage evolve. So a lot of people have seen one of a very popular thing that I talked about last year was the cost of insurance this year. I don't think anybody was really expecting it to be what it is, and hopefully that will change and hopefully that will get addressed. But right now, some people are looking at some very scary insurance bills, and we want to make sure that we can look at those and address those. I mean, in some cases, people retiring before 65 when Medicare is available are actually deciding to stay on Cobra because the costs are the same as what you can get out there in the marketplace. But the coverage is better. So being very thoughtful about these decisions, but also understanding what you're looking at before you retire is extremely important. So this is our plan on purpose. And really, it covers all of these areas that we talked about, investments, income, healthcare, legacy, and taxes, all are very, very important. And if you're not having a discussion about all of these things, we would love to have this discussion with you and show you how it looks for you. So, kind of the journey with us is, you start with the first meeting where we kind of uncover things and talk to you, really kind of get your base desires and figure out where you're at. And then we'll do what's called a rough draft plan based on the information that you provide to us. If you decide to engage us, we will, implement and do our planning review, and then, and then do our client confidence meeting where we reiterate the structure and continue with the plan. But then it's an ongoing thing. It's a working, breathing, living thing that we are addressing constantly and making tweaks where needed, problem solving where needed, telling you great things like, hey, you're not spending enough money. Please go on an extra vacation. Take me if you want to. It's fine. So I love having those conversations. But my favorite conversations and planning is when I'm able to confidently tell someone, hey, guess what? You can retire. You're going to be fine. Just seeing the relief on people's faces, I just love it. It really just gets me out of bed every single day. And so this is the family. And I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. If you have any questions, we are here for you. I'd love to meet you if I haven't met you already, and if I have, hello. And I will give it back to Zach now.
Yep, thanks, Grace. Awesome job. Really appreciate everybody taking the time to be with us this afternoon. Again, we're going to get the recording out to you later this week. We will send this probably around Friday afternoon. Worst case, this will be first thing Monday morning of next week. But again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to our team. If you're currently not working with the Reliance Financial Partners family, we'd love to have a conversation with you. I'll probably shoot you a quick note after this presentation ends just to see if you have any questions, concerns, anything we can do to put you on the right path when it comes to retirement. But these webinars are going to be taking place on a monthly basis. Again, we've got our speaker series starting tomorrow with Amy Rambo of Blue Pineapple Travel. We really want you to sign up for that if you're a client and you haven't yet. But if not, we will see you around this time next month for another webinar with Grace. More information on that to come soon. But that's all we have for you today, Grace. Anything else before we hop off?
Happy New Year, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Awesome. We appreciate it. Last thing, real quick, I see we got a couple questions in the comment. I'm just taking these down. We'll follow up with you on these. I see a couple coming through. I've taken these down, so we'll reach out to you here shortly.
All right.
All right. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.